What is a human being? Quoting Wikipedia, a human being is a social being with reason and consciousness, a subject of socio-historical activity and culture. Biologically, it belongs to the species Homo sapiens, which arose on Earth as a result of a long evolutionary process, anthropogenesis, the details of which continue to be studied. The specific features of man that distinguish him from animals are upright walking, a highly developed brain, thinking and articulate speech. A person studies and changes himself and the world around him, creates culture and his own history. The essence of man, his origin and purpose, and his place in the world have been and remain the main problems of philosophy, religion, science and art. There are at least four approaches to defining the concept of the term human. Man in the natural systematics of animals. Man as an entity that transcends the living world and, to a certain extent, opposes it. Man in the sense of the human race. Man as an individual, a personality, distinctive human features, the ability to think, the ability to make free choices, to take responsibility for actions, the presence of moral judgments. When describing a person, they note his biological unsuitability, the lack of specialization of his organs for any particular simple animal existence, the ability to produce tools, produce fire and use them, the gift of speech, plasticity of behavior. No other being is known who has higher emotions, traditions, the ability to think, affirm, deny, count, plan, knows about his mortality, loves in the true sense of the word, has a sense of humor, carries out his plans, reproduces what is available and creates something new. Does a person have an expiration date? Man, like milk or eye drops, is also not a creator, but a creation. And this creation also needs instructions and certain storage conditions, without which it quickly deteriorates. What is the shelf life of a person? With food or medicines, everything is clear. They deteriorate quickly in both heat and cold, and therefore they must be maintained under certain conditions. It is written, for example, on the package with eye drops store at a temperature from 2 to 15 degrees. So only under this condition can they be useful. The moral: if you do not follow the instructions, it will be very bad. The first proof in history was the Garden of Eden. Even in seemingly ideal conditions, and with a specially selected team, everything went wrong. Conclusion: you cannot leave a person without constant supervision and clear instructions. He is too imperfect by nature. It is possible that a person will someday self-improve to such an extent that he will not hesitate when choosing between good and evil. But so far, man is a perishable commodity. Strangely enough, but a person is spoiled not only by the lack of freedom, but also by its opposite, unlimited freedom. And it is in some ways more insidious than imprisonment. In captivity, you can dream of escape, of salvation, and that they will figure it out at the top. And what can you dream about when there is no censorship or morality? For example, in Russia, since the 90s, we have seen all this in reality and we see it every day. They announced to everyone that there was no censorship, and therefore freedom came. Let's just say freedom from everything, from duty, from duties, from principles. Literally everything went bad before our eyes. Huge factories suddenly turned into a pile of ruins. Free medicine remained somewhere on paper, but on TV every day they began to beg for money for the treatment of sick children. The red machine on ice is now capable of losing to anyone. The chess crown has also not been ours for a long time. We can no longer make cars without outside help. And instead of researchers or, at least, rich tourists, the actress Julia was launched into space for some reason. To sit out, to escape abroad, to get a fake certificate is for many people in Russia today in the order of things. What helped the Russian people in all the wars against the invaders? This is a sense of duty and holy faith. In remote Siberian settlements, where there was no special power from the outside, there were strong family foundations and traditions. And the soldiers from these villages fought to the death with the enemy not for the Tsar, the president, or for money, but for their homeland. Now an entire generation is being lost, which is growing up without a clearly directed vector. It was only recently that the people from above caught on and gave the go-ahead for patriotic education of young people. But young people now have thoughts only of how to get more money by straining less. School children dream of being deputies. And why did this happen? Yes, that's why. An ordinary person is a stupid brute, completely devoid of the original desire for goodness, light and other Sovietism. Moreover, a person, unlike the products in the refrigerator, is susceptible to suggestion. And if the right temperature is enough for a package of milk or an ampoule of medicine, then a person needs the right information field. And if the state does not create it, the human brain begins to actively perceive other radiation, usually coming from a hostile source. Goebbels also promised to turn any nation into a herd of pigs with the help of the media. He could be proud of his students today. Goebbels also knew the antidote. The worst enemy of any propaganda is intellectualism. And here it's time to remember about the information field. Engineers know what foolproof is. This is when smart developers spend a lot of time so that the dumbest animal in the world would not be able to put a finger in the socket. It is no coincidence that there is an item in the instructions for the circular saw. It is forbidden to stop with your hands. The main task of a normal state is to constantly keep an eye on its people and, most importantly, to influence them correctly. By example, by word, by deed, by book, by performance, by news release, by any means. This is a fool's protection at the state level. A fool should not have any opportunity to harm himself, his neighbor, or the country as a whole. A person is easily susceptible to suggestion. Whoever inspires better, the person will follow. Reinforced concrete phrases like "What do you need a head for?" do not work in practice. Most people only need a head to eat. If you do not explain from childhood that matches are not a toy for children, then sooner or later something will definitely flare up somewhere. This has always been used by scammers, especially political ones. When, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, a person found himself on his own, an unpleasant circumstance immediately became clear. Without landmarks, restrictions, faith in something bright, a person began to degrade sharply. Gangs, gang fights, shuttle boats, a drunken president. This is not forgotten. And when the number of TV channels increased by an order of magnitude, there was a general groan. There's nothing to watch, but in the end, they look at what they have. And they are slowly getting used to the realization that Stalin personally carried out the bombing of Hiroshima, and that there was never any Gagarin in the world. The task of the state is to build a powerful defense against fools. To deprive a fool of the opportunity to make mistakes is an important state task, not a restriction of freedom. And if the fool does not want to respect his country and calls for the kingdom of the overseas, Varangians, then there is a choice for them too, from logging to emigration to a place where you are so appreciated and expected, so that others don't suffer because of this fool. After all, people are not born, but become human.